Hello, everybody. My name's Roy. I'm an MK Ultra survivor, also known as a targeted individual. And today I've got the great pleasure of a young lady from the US, and her name's Lexa. Nice to see you, Lexa.
Hi, Roy. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. And so, what are we here for, and what happened, and what started, and when did it all start?
Hi, so I'm Lexa. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a southern state of the US. This all started in the couple weeks leading up to April 18th, 2023 in Stamford, Texas. Stamford is a small town, approximately 2 hours outside of Dallas. I was in Texas to build my real estate business, and I was also in Texas to own my own land and build a tiny home on that land. So in Stamford, Texas, I was already working on my project of one of my pieces of property. I had three in that particular town. And I had found an extremely inexpensive way to own this property, to buy it. And I had a a building, basically a shell of a building on top of the land. And so I was doing a do-it-yourself project to complete my tiny home. And at this time, I was traveling around to my different properties to manage them. And I was living the life of an entrepreneur. So I was in Stamford, Texas, and a man named Gil Lopez. I met him around a month before April 18th, 2023. I met him around town. It seemed normal enough. I actually met him at his workplace. So this man works at the Hamilton Avenue Allsups in Stamford, Texas. I met him at his workplace, and I did a little bit of research on him before I even felt comfortable socializing with him, in the sense that I knew where he worked, I knew where he lived. Where he lived was extremely close to my property. So long story short, Roy, is that I socialized with this man 3 times. It was nothing like, we didn't date, we didn't kiss or anything like that. I socialized with him. And basically, the final time that I socialized with this man, he let me know a couple of things. Number one, he told me that he was born into the Bonanno crime family, which is a mafia crime family out of California, where he's originally from. The other thing that happened that last time that I've socialized with this man is that he took a picture of me, which I heard the click of his camera, right? So he took a picture of me when he thought that I would not notice. And to me, that was enough. Those two things taken in combination with one another were enough for me to say, I want nothing to do with this man whatsoever. Because I had already been accustomed to traveling around and just living life as a single woman, I was accustomed to how to take care of myself and stay safe. So because of those two subtle things, especially, when you hear a camera click, I didn't say, oh, there's no way I heard that. I knew what I heard. So to me, that was enough to be suspicious and to try to see ahead, like why would someone do something like that? I wasn't 100% sure, taken in tandem with what he told me about what he was born into, which I did believe him. This man is visibly Italian, which is not to be discriminatory towards Italian people at all, but it matched up with the information he gave me that was concerning to my own safety. On the day of April 18th, 2023, I blocked this man, Gil Lopez's number. He only ever had a Google Voice number for me, Roy, which is basically, it's just an app that gives you another number that's not your real number. So I was already taking safety measures for myself, right? But because I was so suspicious and I had never come across anyone who had claimed to have been born in a crime family, I actually left the town entirely and headed back to my hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina. And please stop me if I'm getting too in the weeds and I
Oh,
need
no,
to.
not at all.
So thank you so much. So I'm going to divide this into, chapters of about 3 months each and major events of everything that's happened since. So we're now in April of 2024. So this has been happening for 1 year now. The night of April 18th, 2023, again, I had been accustomed to traveling. I did go to sleep in my vehicle that night. Unfortunately, that has been used against me. However, this is my property and I was traveling. I knew how to keep myself safe while traveling. And again, I was traveling back home to keep myself safe. So the long and short of it is that the night of April 18th, 2023, this man and one of his criminal connections broke into my car while I was already asleep, drugged me in my sleep, raped me in my sleep, physically raped me, and videoed the rape. So the way that I was able to put this together, because I was drugged in my sleep, I have zero recollection of the rape itself. So it took me approximately 3 days to put together 100% with 100% certainty that the rape had actually happened. There are multiple things that caused me to put this together. And I want to start off by saying that from the beginning of this, I have been many degrees removed from this, right? When people hear trafficking, often they think, or incorrectly tend to think, well, what must this person have done to put themselves in harm's way, or what must this person have done to involve themselves? I have never been involved in any of this. From the very beginning of this, I have fought it with everything that I have, using everything that any person who had been victim of this horrible crime would have. So it took me those 3 days, taking everything in tandem. I found semen on the sheets of where I had been sleeping in my car. I found a white residue of the latch on my car door. It did take me a few days to find this residue, but I found it was like a Vaseline type of substance. So that must have been something that they used to slip into the door to forcibly open the door in my sleep without waking me. And I had to think back to everything that I had observed about this man in the time leading up to April 18th. The semen and many other things. For example, a lot of MK Ultra victims may be familiar with this, and those unfamiliar with it may not be familiar with it. So for example, when you're blacked out with these rapes, with the way that they have blacked me out, I'm not passed out completely. I don't appear unresponsive in the videos of the rapes, of these forced rapes, that I know for certain that I appear awake, because it's just like if someone was, for example, blackout drunk. When someone is blackout drunk, they might be walking around and talking, but they don't have any memory of whatever it is, and they certainly don't have any agency. This is different because I was not drinking. I never made a decision to drink, anything like that. So because you don't have any memory of the rape, part of it encodes into the brain as a dream. I know this part sounds kind of out there to a lot of listeners. However, it's the biggest clue that let me know. And it was only a couple of seconds of a flashback. And I also had to purposefully dig into those couple of seconds to retrieve these flashbacks. So I won't go too much into that, but it was mostly the fact that he had told me that he had been born into a crime family. And then so after the night of the first rape, April 18th, during that time, I was traveling back to North Carolina, and I already noticed people stalking me. One man, when I stopped at a rest stop, approached me and talked to me. I was suspicious. And because of that, I listened to what he had to say. This man knew where I was headed. He said, oh, so where are you headed? I already knew at that time, Roy, that anytime a stranger is approaching me, first of all, I usually ignore them. But because I was already suspicious, I said to him, I'm headed to Columbia, South Carolina. Never said Charlotte or anything like that. I had Texas license plates. At the end of this very short conversation, this man said to me, so when are you going to be in Charlotte? I said, Charlotte? I never told you I was going to be in Charlotte. Now, again, that's a preemptive measure that a lot of women will understand. We have to say things like that. It's not because I'm a liar. It's because we have to say things like that to keep ourselves safe. So I knew at that point that this man must be connected to this Gil Lopez. Now, I will say very quickly that in the time leading up to this, with me traveling around Texas, it became clear that trafficking was a problem. And it became clear that these traffickers, they actually placed tracking devices on the vehicles of whoever they're trying to stalk. That's kind of a long story. So I had to put together that this man placed a tracking device on my vehicle. There was no other way that Gil Lopez could have sent this other organized criminal / stalker to come to exactly where I was at a rest stop in Georgia and know I was headed to Charlotte. So the long and short of it is that throughout that trip from Texas to North Carolina after April 18th, I became aware that I was being stalked, and I had never experienced anything like this with a group of people stalking me. I got to North Carolina. I was still putting things together. Once I realized that I had been raped, I stopped at a hospital. I asked for a rape kit and everything like that. And I was headed back to North Carolina. So I get to North Carolina. I'm still being stalked. At this point, I had said, okay, I've never experienced anything like this. I want nothing to do with this. Again, this is as I'm putting things together in my mind, thinking back to every conversation I had with this man, thinking back to the times that he would have gone to put something on my vehicle when my vehicle wasn't in my sight. And so I said to myself, I might not know exactly what this is, but I know it's organized crime and I want absolutely nothing to do with it. Therefore, I'm not even going to continue my own plan of just having my own land and building my home in Texas. So at that time, I did drive again to return to Texas to get my things. When I returned to Texas, it was extremely clear that people were treating me differently in town. This is a very small town. It's got a population of around 1,500. It might be a different population. It's an estimate. But it became clear that whatever Gil Lopez was connected to something bigger than I had ever seen, something more dangerous than I had ever seen. I returned to Texas to get my things, just the bare minimum of things that I needed to get out of my building, my belongings, all the deeds to my properties. I didn't want to just leave all that in Texas. And throughout that, I continued to be stalked. And, at that time, I'm having to put together the flashback of seeing Gil Lopez outside my car with a flashlight during the rape, thinking, so why would these people do this? Because they're pornographers who are, there are pornographers who go about it legally, who they pay the women, and they're doing it legally. Now, for what it's worth, Roy, I'm personally against all pornography, but that's aside from the point, because these people are doing this totally illegally with totally unwilling participants. I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. I have not been connected to any of this. As soon as I have become suspicious of someone that they're connected to this, I break all contact. That's been the case from the beginning. From that point on, I was being stalked heavily in Texas. I was trying to figure out what to do. I actually flew to Salt Lake City while I was on. And again, there's so many details I'm not going into for the sake of brevity. So I actually parked my car once I realized. So I went to the police. I went to the police in Texas, and basically it became clear that the captain of the Stamford Police Department is connected to Gil Lopez. They refused to take the report of my rape. So that's the local police department. And there's more that tells me that it wasn't just a coincidence that they refused to take my rape. That captain specifically went out of his way to turn another police officer who I had went to against me. I put the Stamford police captain on the phone, and it was clear that he tried to slander me and discredit me. So because I was being stalked so heavily with the vehicles stalking me on the interstate, I had stopped at the police station. If there's anything that you'd like me to clarify, please feel free to.
No, so you got the rape kit, and from
Yes.
hospital, what happened with the rape kit?
Well, okay, let me clarify. When I went to the hospital, what I said is that I have significant reason to believe that I was broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep, basically. And I begged them for a rape kit. And I also asked them, Roy, for prophylactic drugs to prevent sexually transmitted infections. And what happened is that a lot of the times in the context of hospitals, unfortunately, any normal person would think, yes, let me go get a rape kit. Let me get all the evidence I can. Unfortunately, the real experience of when you actually go to the hospital and say these things is quite different. So what it turned into was that I was alone, and they actually did not do a rape kit. I had to I had to basically in the hospital beg for both these things, the rape kit and the prophylactic drugs, which prevent STI contraction if you take them at the right time. And at the time, it was more important to me to get the prophylactic drugs. I had to beg them time and time again, like multiple times. They would come into the room and not be doing a rape kit. So at some point I decided, just give me the prophylactic. I didn't really decide it. They did not do a rape kit. At that point, it had already been 72 hours. But again, that's how long it took me to even put together that I had been raped. There's many victims who are date raped and really don't even know it ever. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, while I was still in Texas in this time in late April, I stopped at the Corsicana local police department as I was leaving back from Stanford to go back to North Carolina with my things that I had gotten out of my building. And that was where I said, I basically tried to tell that officer all that I knew, but I had called the Stamford Police Department while I was in the lobby at that police department. And the captain of the Stamford Police Department demanded that I hand the phone over to the officer that I was about to give my testimonial to before I gave my testimony. I don't know exactly what he said to him, but it's clear that he said things to discredit me, and he absolutely refused to take my report. So at that point, after I left the Corsicana Police Department, again, inconclusive, right? I said what I knew, and it was clear that basically nothing was going to come of it. The Corsicana officer did say this sounds like a federal case, and I was like, you're right, because it was already a case where they had stalked me while I'm just independently driving my own car, going home for my own safety. They had already stalked me across state lines. So at that point, because I knew I was being stalked in the vehicles, the next place that I was going to go to stay and just try to be safe was Salt Lake City. I decided to park my car. There's a few days in between here of different events of me just trying to be safe, knowing they're going to break in, and knowing because of the amount of stalking, trying to see ahead that they're going to break in, drug and rape me in my sleep again. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be stalking me. So anyways, I took a flight I actually parked my car at an airport in Texas after trying to muster some support in Texas and figuring out what I was going to try to do long term. Because obviously I didn't want to just leave everything behind, all my properties and everything. So anyways, because it would involve me driving across the country from Texas to Utah for a very long drive, I made the judgment call that because these people were physically following me on the interstate and not just one car, multiple cars, I made the judgment call that I would not drive at nighttime, still, in absolute fear for my safety. I took a plane from Texas to Utah. On that plane ride, 3 men who were not sitting together, who were all wearing the same color sweatshirt, which I know that's a small detail. That wasn't the first thing that clued me into them. They were not sitting together. Towards the end, they were signaling toward each other. There were other clues that made me suspicious initially of one of them. And then when we got off the plane in Utah, they were signaling to each other, even though they were trying to make it clear that they were not actually traveling together. So it was clear that these men were sent to stalk me as well. There's more to that. Once I got to Utah, I went to the police there as well. In multiple instances, in one instance, I went to police because there was a car with no license plate that drove right past me in front of my building. I called the police and just said what I knew about the no license plate. And basically, Roy, because I knew that the stalking was not going to stop, I wanted to be in the most favorable position, frankly, like any victim would want. So I made the choice to go from Salt Lake City to a more favorable position for myself, which would be Charlotte, North Carolina, my hometown. In the process of me doing that, there's a lot of other details. One super important detail is that I actually called the Utah Salt Lake City Police Department back and followed up. And I told them all I knew in a very shortened version about the being broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep, and being stalked across the country. I also went to police at the airport. It became clear that there were people to stalk me on the airplane. And this is, again, it becomes clear to me just as an outsider to this, just observing my surroundings and trying to keep myself safe. So I went back to Charlotte, North Carolina. When I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, it was clear that these people had also stalked me there. They were, I was in a house with, frankly, family, staying with family temporarily. It became clear that these people were stalking me there. And so knowing that these people use the cover of darkness to break into wherever I'm sleeping and drug and rape me in my sleep, I did stay up and keep all the lights on in the house and watch over the house at nighttime. Now that detail has been unfairly used against me, but I ask anyone who thinks that behavior sounds strange to ask themselves, what would they do if they were me? If they had been repeatedly broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep, at this point already having gone to the police multiple times. I'm sorry, Roy, there's one important detail that I skipped over. While I was still in Texas, I went to the FBI on April 27th, 2023, and told them what I knew. And so, yes, it became clear these people were still stalking me in North Carolina. And, of course, at this time, I'm telling everyone in my surroundings what's happening. I'm telling them all that I know. And I will say I'm very grateful for the support that I had a place to stay. And what I'll say about that is that it's an uphill battle. It's been an uphill battle from the very beginning of this. I've been trying to tell everyone everything I know, and it's been an uphill battle to get people to believe me. And that's not, I'm not trying to have a pity party, but it's just a fact because of the nature of the crime and because of how I knew. Is there anything before we move forward?
Well, no, all I was going to say, the sad thing is that they know it's going on and they're just covering it up all the time, as you know. The ones at the top, they all know. Well, that's my belief.
Absolutely, Roy. And my testimony does confirm this. And, I've made the example that for example, there are police officers who aren't necessarily in on the actual raping and pimping that's going on with this. However, the Corsicana officer is an example of how they use a legitimate authority they use the Stamford police captain who is in on this, knowingly in on this, to use his authority to speak to the Corsicana officer, who I do think for the most part, the Corsicana officer wouldn't have been so turned against me. He did partially believe me, right? But they use the ones in on it to turn the ones who are not in on it, me in this case. But I agree. I totally agree with you that, this program, people would be very surprised how many people and operatives in this program are aware that they are doing a pimp operation, are aware that they are raping. And then in some cases, I do think that the three-letter agency, the FBI and potentially CIA, certainly FBI, I do think that in some cases they are in on the actual raping and they're physically breaking in. However, what I've gleaned from this is that they tend to rely on organized crime to do that dirty work, having coordinated it from above, and then profiting off, again, an inference I'm making, but I'm sure that any legitimate investigation into this, which I begged for multiple times, would show this. They would absolutely find that what I am saying is true. They just haven't investigated it. So another important, really quick before we move forward, on April 27th, 2023, I spent probably 2 hours. I showed up at the FBI office. I physically showed up. And then another thing is I physically brought the sheets with the semen on them from April 18th, 2023, which is hard evidence. I brought that to the FBI office. I said, please take this evidence. They refused to take it. So back to Charlotte, North Carolina. I got an apartment. I actually sold my car. There's a lot of different factors here. It became clear that my car was being stalked still. I actually returned to Texas just to pick up my car because remember, I had parked it at an airport. So after I had been back in Charlotte for approximately 3 weeks, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. I traveled back. I took measures to do it in the most secure way. At the time, I was not aware that they were already tracking my phone. I was not fully aware of that. So I took every measure that I thought I could, rented a car to drive back to Texas because I figured, okay, I know I've been stalked in airports, so let me change up my strategy here to try to keep myself safe without just leaving my car there, right? I actually had another truck and my car. I didn't want to leave both my cars along with all 9 of my properties in Texas and just cede everything, right? I have to go get my car. So I traveled back. I did travel back to Texas to get my car from that airport. And in doing that, obviously, I did have to stop at a hotel to sleep at some point. I now have no doubt that I was broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep May 23rd, 2023, at this hotel in McGregor, Texas. What I've found, Roy, and people can do their own investigations into this stuff if they're interested in organized trafficking, is that there are employees of these hotels, cab companies, Uber and Lyft, and these different legitimate organizations and businesses. They have certain individuals who really do actually work there, but who are consciously in on the rape trafficking operation. So again, it's not everyone who works at the hotel, but the problem is quite rancid. There are a lot. They already have a huge existing network. So in my case, I noticed that as soon as they broke in, drugged, and raped me in my sleep once, they're planning to do it again. And I'm clearly on this list that they use this network to then continue to break in, drug, and rape in the sleep. The other thing is that, from the very beginning, I went to police. From the very beginning, pretty much after a few days, I went to FBI. So from early on, these people, these organized traffickers who are used to trying to control their victims by any methods, again, something I've inferenced and researched, it became clear that they were not going to be able to control me. I was never going to be part of any of this. I was going to do whatever I could to expose this illegal activity and this immoral activity. So from the beginning, I will say, and it's not to overstate anything, but I will say that they wanted to try to pull out all the stops, so to speak. Obviously at that time, I knew that there were corrupt police officers in on this by this time, but I did not realize what the TI, the Targeted Individual Program, was. I did not realize what the fusion centers were. So I did not understand, at that time, I did not fully understand that basis. What I will say that I've inferenced is that they'll try to use that, the networks created by the Targeted Individual Program, along with the networks of the organized rape trafficking. And there's a lot of overlap in those two, but they will use the Targeted Individual Program's resources, the people who are working to target innocent Americans and, all across the world, obviously, target innocent civilians and torture us. They're using the resources from that TI program in almost an unofficial sense as much as they can, because they know that what they are doing is so highly illegal. Again, this is an inference I've made, many degrees removed. Because they know that what they're doing is so illegal, they want to try to keep it as off the book as possible. When I say so illegal, what I'm talking about is the RICO Act that was passed in 1970 in the US. It was particularly written so that prosecutors could prosecute organized crime, particularly the mafia. It's the Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act. So what I've been victim to is absolutely prosecutable under that law. So anyways, I'm sorry, picking back up off, once I got back to Charlotte and it became clear that I was being stalked, when I went to Texas in May to get my car. And by the way, Roy, May 23rd, 2023, at that hotel in McGregor, Texas, I wasn't certain that I had been broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep that night. There were certain clues that told me that it was likely already. Again, I've got no memory of these rapes, right? Except sometimes I have a little bit of what feels like a dream at the time, because you've got no agency and you've got no memory. But but I had that little bit of a memory. That part of this is very, very much MK Ultra-esque, which I didn't know about MK Ultra at the time, but I knew my own self and my brain and all these other clues. So I actually demanded to see the security footage at the hotel. They gave me the runaround. They gave me the number of the manager who wasn't working at the time. I called her, never got a call back and all that. So of course I'm going to head back to Charlotte because again, I'm worried about my nightly safety. I'm already at the point that I know that wherever I stop in any of this, that they're going to break in, drug and rape me in my sleep, something I put together by this time. I headed back to Charlotte. I did make the decision to sell my car when I got back to Charlotte. And, you know, that was a financial decision. Also at the time, again, I knew I was up against something big, but I thought at the time, I thought they associate clearly these organized traffickers who are stalking me and raping me, associate me with this vehicle. Otherwise I wouldn't have been followed on the interstate all over. So I did sell my car. I'm glad that I did. With that money, I set up, I was very grateful that I had the support of my family to get me an apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina at that time. There was a little bit of a time where I was with other family and, you know, needed to figure out where I was going to stay. So, but again, that's just someone living their own normal life, right? And trying to get to safety amid this. So yes, I insisted on getting an alarm system in my apartment. I could tell that I was being stalked. And so because I had that alarm system, it's an alarm system that I insisted, and again, coming up against obstacles, even with, for example, the man who installed the alarm system. And also, Roy, please cut me off whenever we reach the time or anytime.
No,
So
plenty of time is up to you, Lexa.
thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you.
Yeah.
So like, for example, just to give part of an example of what an uphill battle this is and how to advocate, like when the man came to install that expensive alarm system that immediately calls the police, once the alarm system is armed and I've punched in my code, if any door is opened, it calls the police immediately within like 2 or 3 seconds. And so when he came in to install the alarm system, I insisted that they also put it on the windows. Just knowing how thorough my attackers were by this point, I didn't want to leave any chance. And just for an example, like this man was not in on it, but just for an example, he's like, well, what? I assure you that no one's going to break into the window, or you're not going to need that. I said, look, I promise you, there's a good reason for it, right? So during those 2.5 months, from June to around the end of August 2023, I was not broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep, which is only due to that alarm system. However, I was still being stalked, and I knew that I was being stalked because my attackers sent one man to say something to me that lined up with the exact words that man, remember I referenced that man in Georgia who had stopped at the gas station. They sent that man to say exact words that other man had said and nothing else. So they do. Of course, I ignored that man completely and kept walking. I was just walking in my neighborhood when this man said this to me, but I knew I was still being stalked, and it functions as fear. It functions in that sense that they want the gangs. Sorry?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, it's like they want, it functions as fear. They want me to know and make the connection because they want me to be scared, right? At that time, I was just trying to live my life. I was trying to, for example, I was selling clothing on Poshmark. I was just trying to, in light of all this, rebuild my life and move on, right? I had already gone to the FBI and other police at least 4 other times by this point. And so I was just trying to keep myself safe and move on. So I'm going to share a specific, and the reason for that is that it's important people understand just how evil these rape traffickers are and how evil this program is. My mother and I, so after 2.5 months of being in that apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, my mother and I went on a vacation. She wanted to go on the vacation. And, you know, at that point, I decided to go on the vacation with her. Anyone should be entitled to live their life freely, right? Especially having done everything I could by this point. My mother and I went on a vacation. Basically, long story short, Roy, it became clear to me on that vacation that these horrible, evil people broke in, drugged, and raped both me and my mother on this vacation. They made it extremely clear that they were stalking me on the roads once again, but because of all the other types of clues, I knew that there are physical clues and physical symptoms. There's the dream thing, and then there's the other stuff with the stalking. For example, the first night that they broke in, drugged, and raped both me and my mother in our sleep, when we were on our vacation, we were in a hotel room. When we woke up, the window was unlocked. It had not been unlocked at any point. All the windows had been locked. And it was taken in tandem with these other physical symptoms that I already knew to look for. And again, because you have no memory of the rapes, and because this is all so out there to the average person, it does combine with the fact, number 3, that unfortunately, the majority of people, when you're coming out with this, unfortunately, my surroundings at the time did not tend to believe that what I was saying was true. But that goes back to the nature of the crime, because again, I've been broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep. My mother has been broken into, drugged, and raped in her sleep. She has no memory of it either, right? So these criminals, these organized traffickers, these pornographers who make videos of rape after breaking in and drugging in this case me, they're extremely sophisticated. They've been doing this so much and getting away with it so much that the methods and the strategies that they're using are pretty sophisticated and advanced, frankly. On that vacation, there were also multiple vehicles with Texas tags that were clearly stalking me. Now, people might hear that and say, well, a Texas tag doesn't prove anything, but it's a pattern. There were Texas tags that I looked up that had like the little frame of the car dealership that it was bought at, for example, and the name of the town I looked up, and turns out it was only an hour away from Stamford, Texas, and all these other things. Multiple Texas vehicles stalking me, literally doing circles around the street that I was walking on while me and my mother were just vacationing, going shopping on this strip in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It was clear that they were stalking me. Another important detail from this, Roy, there's so many details from this trip in August of 2023 with me and my mother on vacation, just living our lives, not involved in anything, not willing participants in anything. In fact, having done everything to prevent this. A really, really important detail is that once I knew that they were breaking in, drugging, and raping both my mother and I in our sleep, I resolved at that time myself that once I got home, I was going to go back to the FBI. I was going to make sure I was at home so that I was on a favorable footing. And I was going to do everything I could to fight this, because now not only have they harmed me, and they've harmed my mother, who I care about like anyone cares about their mother. So, for example, the last place that my mother and I were at on our vacation, I was turning the lights of the porch on, again, because these people use the cover of nighttime, and they use the fact that both people are sleeping, or one person is sleeping, or the fact that you're in your sleep so you don't even know that they've broken in and drugged you. I was staying outside of the house that she had rented for our vacation. I was sitting on the porch and leaving the lights on to watch the house at nighttime while she slept. In one instance, among many other details, towards the very end of this trip, and taken with other context of stalking, many other details, again, sorry, a car drove by the main road of this little complex and shot shots into the air of a gun. Right. So it's that they're knowing now that they're observing my behavior. These organized traffickers are clearly observing my behavior to know that I know that the rapes are happening again, because again, so much of their criminal enterprise, of this business, this rape pimp business that they have put together and profited from, relies on the fact that the victim does not even know that they have been broken into, drugged, and raped in their sleep. So the fact that I know, they're going to take retaliation measures. So the shots into the air was a retaliation measure.
You okay?
Yes, I'm sorry. Is there anything you want me to pause for, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna pause for a sec because there was a couple of things I was gonna. After you
Thank
left.
you. All right, thank you. So we left off in my mother and I had that vacation in April. Sorry, I'm not April, August of 2023, late August, my bad. And this was a relatively long vacation. You know, at that time I had sold my car. So at that time, unfortunately, I did not have the ability to just hop in the car and drive home. I did beg my mother. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the crime, she was like, no, we're going to stop. We're going to finish the vacation and then head home. So at this point, Roy, you know, my mother's driving the car. Finally, we get to the end of the vacation. Of course, I'm aware that they have broken into, drugged, and raped us in our sleep multiple times on this trip. There's so many other details about this trip, Roy. In one instance, we woke up and my mother's phone had been cracked and totally broken, and it hadn't been broken when we went to sleep. Other things, there was a man who apparently worked for the complex that we were renting this house from. And I caught him literally peeping at our window, listening into our conversation where I was saying, Mama, they broke in, drugged, and raped us in our sleep. You know, something I had already told her from the beginning of this. And, you know, of course, she's saying, no, that didn't happen because, of course, no normal person is going to think, no normal person, because of the nature of the crime, is going to think that happened when you have zero recollection of it. And, of course, you feel safe, right? So, for example, there was a Ring camera on the front of this house that we had rented for this last leg of this vacation. These people know how to get around things. Like, for example, I don't know how they entered the house there to break in, drug, and rape us in our sleep. But for the couple of times that I did fall asleep while my mother was also asleep, or you know, fell asleep during the day, and she unfortunately did leave the house. But again, that's not on her because she's just being a normal person going about her life like anyone would. It's the nature of the crime. So I'm sorry. So, like, for example, there was a Ring camera on the door of this house. But again, Roy, number one, because I know that even my mother doesn't believe me, because I know I've already been to the police so many times and I haven't been believed or helped. And because I am literally in fear for my life because of, for example, the gunshots let off into the air, and the fact that we're clearly surrounded by people who are in on this to some degree. I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to go to the police again, but I'm going to make sure that I do it right, that I not just try to go randomly to the local police again. You know, not randomly. It wouldn't have been random to report the crime of a rape at the local police station. But because I already had the experience of having gone to the local PDs 4 times, FBI once by this time, I knew that was not going to work. It's just common sense. So my mother and I traveled from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, back to Charlotte, North Carolina. During this trip, Roy, I was absolutely in fear for my life. These stalkers were following us in multiple vehicles, you know, and I'll just pause really quickly to say, for anyone who is watching this, who is not already a targeted individual, a huge first impression or first question that people have is, why would so many people be coming after you? Or, unfortunately, the more rude way of saying that I have unfortunately heard from many people, what makes you so special? Well, this is where targeted individuals like you and like so many other targeted individuals who have been correctly exposing this program come into play, because with that information, we understand that they have the resources and the money and the operatives and the people to fund this amount of stalking. Why would they do that? Because they know that I know, and they're trying to contain me. And yes, I'm in fear for my life, as anyone in my position who has been victim to what I have been victim to would be. And they're trying to intimidate me out of saying anything clearly. Now, it's never going to work. But, you know, people ask, why why would this many people be after you? And people simply ask that because they're simply not aware of the targeted individual program. And they're certainly not aware that the targeted individual program is also a rape trafficking program and a pimp program. Not only are innocent civilians being tortured, we're being raped, and there's a huge, huge overlap. And the amount of people who are in on the rape trafficking knowingly within the targeted individual program as operatives of it is much larger than most people would think, including larger than most TIs would think, I will say, up to this point. Of course, there have been many TIs who have already said what I'm saying about the physical breaking in, drugging, and raping in the sleep, but it's not as commonly known even as the program up to this point, I will say, which we have to expose both, because they're murdering innocent people and they're raping innocent people. So they absolutely did send lots of stalkers on that trip back home, especially Roy, because they knew that I knew, despite the drugging and despite having no recollection of the rapes and no agency because of the forced drugging and the sleep, they knew that I knew. And for that reason, they added more gang stalkers to follow us home. So I was absolutely in fear for my life on that trip home. Once we got home to Charlotte, North Carolina, to my apartment, now there are so many other details I haven't included, Roy. At this point, like right before I sold my car, I actually went to a private investigator. I hired a private investigator to try to find the tracking device on my vehicle. And unfortunately, Roy, I know it sounds so out there, but the nature of this is that, for example, I called the first private investigator that I found on my phone. This was back in June of 2023. Sorry to jump around, but just to give context for, most people are going to say, okay, try this. And I'm trying to give context that I appreciate suggestions and feedback, but in so many cases, I have already tried all these things, and it speaks to how large this pimp program is. I hired a private investigator to try to find the tracking device on my vehicle. Unfortunately, during the process of that, it became clear to me through my own picking up on things that this man was somehow connected to the organized traffickers. Just to finish my thought, I had looked up private investigator on my phone, right? And the first one that came up, I called, and I very briefly said, I've been broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep. I've gone to the police and nothing has helped. I need someone to look at my vehicle to try to find a tracking device on my vehicle. He referred me to another private investigator office in Charlotte, NC, that deals with this stuff typically. Now, does that mean that that private investigator who referred me knows the extent to this? Not necessarily, but it means that the person who's known as being an expert on this type of stalking is actually being either paid off or otherwise controlled to be a part of this and to feed back information to the operatives running this operation. And in that case, I do think, well, I won't speak too much more on that, but I tried the private investigator thing, and once again, what ended up happening as a result of that was that there was just information that ended up making its way back to the operatives running my attackers program of breaking in, drugging, raping me in my sleep, stalking me. And I know that based on specific things that this private investigator said to me. And I've explained these specifics. I actually recorded hours and hours of testimony on YouTube. I've got so many hours already where I go into extreme, intricate detail, because I want people to know not only what they've done to me, but I want women to understand how bad this is, that the things that we think keep us safe when it comes to these people, you don't have to be involved whatsoever. So anyways, okay, I'm back to, so we get back in the end of August. This is the last week of August 2023. My mother and I get back to Charlotte, North Carolina. I already knew I was going to go to the FBI office in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I said to myself, okay, let me get a night's sleep and let me go the next day. And once again, Roy, like the average person, or let's say the average thing that a lot of people would think to do is call the FBI, right? Because of the urgency of this, with it being nightly safety, the amount of people stalking me, the highly illegality of this, the fact that these are RICO criminals, I said to myself, I'm not going to leave it up to chance and just call them for them to never call me back. I'm going to at least show up. So now we're getting to the last week of August 2023. This is an important week in my testimony. So basically, I knew that I had to show up, and I knew that the need was urgent. I'm a strong believer, just to pause really quickly, the targeted individual program makes use of so much technology that the average citizen doesn't even know exists. But this program is it's being coordinated by humans at the top who are rape traffickers, who are profiting off the rapes, along with the other, torture traffickers. So long and short of it is that I'm a strong believer that it's a team of humans that they use to do this awful criminal activity. And so I believe that not only is that really useful, understanding that really useful, and getting information about this program many degrees removed by observing, I also believe that the answer to justice and for no one to be raped and for no one to be tortured, no innocent civilian to be tortured, is in a human answer. So anyways, just to pick back up, I showed up at the FBI office the next morning. It's a long story. I insisted to see someone, basically at the FBI office in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is on Microsoft Way, is the name of the street of this FBI office that I showed up on that Tuesday of the last week of August 2023. So these FBI offices, it's like the FBI office main, there's like the parking lot, and then there's like a preliminary building you have to pass through that has the metal detectors, and where they let you in, they clear you to go into the building, right? So actually the FBI, and it turns out many other agencies have employed this private security firm. The name of the security firm in this case is Paragon Security. So they subcontract Paragon Security to have the two security guards at the preliminary place with the metal detectors before you get into the building. So I get to the FBI. I park my car, I show up, I park my car. Again, having to act independently, being in an environment where, unfortunately, due to the nature of the crime, everyone I've told up to this point has not believed me at this point. To some extent, they have believed me, but it's not that simple. So I showed up. Now, just a quick pause about the traffickers running this program. I believe that we have to put ourselves mentally in their minds to see the steps that they're taking. Predict the steps that they're taking. So for example, the fact that I had showed up to the FBI office on April 27th, 2023 in person, and the fact that it was that agency that I showed up to, the traffickers running this program, this rape trafficking organized criminal syndicate, are trying to think ahead of what authority I'm going to go to, because ultimately they know that if I keep going to the police, I do have a chance at legitimate government intervention, right? So they're I'm sorry, one second. They're predicting my moves based on my behavior that I've already exhibited, right? So at this time, I'm thinking in those terms. So I showed up to the FBI office. I insisted to speak with an agent. They insisted that I give my testimony in that small room, and that I not go into the building, in that small building with the metal detector, and that I not go into the building. There was a man, a security guard who worked for Paragon Security, who said multiple things to me. And again, I know people listening are going to be like, well, how do you know that that means that? But again, this man said things to me that it was clear were very subtle threats. They try to make threats against family or anything that they think that I care about, right? To try to discourage me from testifying against these organized criminals. It became clear to me, it did take me, so I gave my testimony that first day for 2.5 hours, but these two security guards are hearing my entire testimony when technically they don't have the security clearance to hear the information that an FBI agent has the security clearance to hear. So I'll just say, you know, without getting too much into the weeds, and if you have a specific question, please feel free to ask me, but it took me going home that night and replaying what this man had said to me to realize definitively that this man had been preemptively, as a part of this organized criminal syndicate concretely connected to Gil Lopez, preemptively sent to, in some way, try to contain me. Again, so much of this is about who this organized criminal syndicate already has contact with as individuals, and who they can pay off or otherwise control, especially bribe. So I figured out that this man had been sent to contain me, this security guard. I also have significant reason to believe that after I left that first day at the FBI, that he most likely tried to say things to the FBI agent that I had given my testimony to try to discredit me immediately. So once I put that together that night, I said to myself, I'm not going to leave it up to chance. I've already been through this once. I'm not going to leave it up to chance that nothing come of this again. It's already so important and urgent, and my safety. And now they've already done this to both me and my mother. I'm going to show up at the FBI office again, you know? So I encourage people to not take that out of context and to ask themselves what they would have done if they had been victim to this. I went back to the FBI office the next morning, didn't take up a whole bunch of time, but I asked to speak to another FBI agent. The first FBI agent's name was Chase that first day. The second FBI agent's name was Desiree. So Desiree is technically the human trafficking contact for the Charlotte FBI field office. So I had to show up, and they did let me into the building this time. I spent about 30 or 35 minutes giving her more of the testimony that I had not had the chance to give Chase the previous day. And she made it clear that she would be my contact. But again, we're dealing with the bureaucracy of, well, we'll see if we'll investigate this kind of thing. She didn't say that to me directly. I will say that I know that this woman believed me. I strongly know that this woman actually believed my testimony. So again, because the gang stalking, at this time, once I'm leaving the FBI office, the gang stalking is ramping up. That second day, the Paragon security employee who I had deduced was in on this and connected to Gil Lopez was not working that day. Third day, I showed up, and that same man, whose name I did not get, which I wish I had, I can give his description. He was working the front desk again. When he saw me, he was very surprised. So I showed up at the front. I said, you know, he's like, who are you here to speak to? He's surprised. I said, my contact. He said, oh crap, you were here yesterday? Like he was not happy that I had been there the day that he was not working, right? He wasn't expecting that because he was sent to contain me. So I said, yes. So I spoke to, sorry?
No, I just said, I'm just twigging that he'd contained you.
Yeah, they tried to. I think, you know, I didn't want to leave it up to chance that they could, which is why I felt the sense of urgency. But yeah, at this time they were ramping up the gang stalking. They were sending multiple cars with no license plates to stalk me in my neighborhood as I'm walking around. And again, they're doing that now. Remember, the 2.5 months that I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, in that neighborhood where they didn't break in, drug, and rape me in my sleep, which I know for a fact. I didn't have any of the physical symptoms or any of the dreams or any of the other things that lead me to know I've been raped in my sleep, broken into, drugged, and raped in my sleep again. I had been stalked, but the stalking was not this heavy. They ramped back up the stalking, you know, for a combination of reasons, but obviously to try to prevent me from testifying, right? To try to intimidate me out of it. So that's also contributing to the sense of urgency I'm having about stopping these people's criminal activity and rightfully putting them in prison where they belong, just to get them to leave me alone. Showed up that third day, talked to her briefly, this time again in the small building where the man who works for Paragon Security, who I had already correctly deduced was sent to try to contain me. You know, it's not going to work on his terms the way he wanted it to. You know, I told her a couple of things. And at that time, I said to her, when we were in the small building, and again, this man is overhearing this. So I said to her, Desiree, don't you think that if someone says to you something like, you shouldn't have been socializing with someone you don't know, speaking about Gil Lopez, which is, so this man, this Paragon employee, the first day that I had been there, he had said to me a victim blaming remark, which is not the only reason that I knew that he was sent for me, but it's one of the supporting things. He said, well, you shouldn't have been socializing with someone you don't know, right? Like as if it's my fault, right? So I said to her, I said, Desiree, don't you think that if someone said something like, oh, well, you shouldn't have been socializing with Gil Lopez, someone you don't know, don't you think that would have been victim blaming? I said this right in front of the Paragon employee, and she said yes. And then I got up, I was in the building, and I pointed at the Paragon employee and I said, that man said that to me the first day I came here, and you weren't here to hear it. And she immediately said, Landon, I'm sorry that happened. My first name is Landon. My name is Landon Alexa Rice. I have nothing to hide. My middle name is Lexa. I've always gone by it. She said, Landon, I'm sorry. I consider that a violation, and I'll report it. And she believed me on that too. The next day, Roy, I did show up again. The reason being that up until this point, and throughout one of these days, and there's so many other details about this with the gang stalking and other actions that this Paragon employee tried to take against me to try to harm my physical body. That's a whole other story. So I won't get into all the details about that just in the interest of time. But during these 4 days that I'm showing up, I once again brought the sheets with the semen from the night of the first rape, April 18th, 2023. I said, I brought these to the FBI the first time, these semen stained sheets. You could see the semen physically. I said, I have it in my car. Will you please take the sheets, because it's very clear evidence. It will absolutely tie back to my rapist. I'm not even sexually active. There's no chance it's anyone but the rapist, which, you know, people can be sexually active and it doesn't mean they can't be a victim of rape, but I wasn't even sexually active at the time. That shouldn't matter. But unfortunately, because of the victim blaming and sexism, frankly, I know that it is a factor. So anyways, I said, can you please take the sheets? Once again, they said, we can't take the sheets. So that was like something really, really concrete and tangible evidence that I had, which is why I was so gung-ho about them taking it. When they refused to take it, I did decide, once again, I had one other thing that I wanted to say. So I did go to the FBI office a fourth time, only because of the urgency of this, only because I had significant reason to believe my life was at risk, in addition to my nightly safety, because of the gang stalking that they were ramping up outside of the FBI office. I said, sorry, let me check on time to see where we're at. Okay, so we've got 15 more minutes. Sorry, I'm gonna have to.
No hurry at all. It's okay.
Thank you, but I want to stick to what we said and just give an overview. This is the most important part. This part here is really the most important part, so that people understand, unfortunately, how much of an uphill battle it is to even get in contact with a legitimate government intervention when you're dealing with organized crime and the program. I do think that there are FBI agents who don't know the extent to which this program is doing that. Now, with that being said, that doesn't change the fact that the program and the raping, the pimp program and the torture of innocent civilians program, it doesn't change the fact that they use those good-hearted and mostly unknowing or unfairly turned against agents against us. But anyways, I'm sorry. So the fourth day, because I, for once, had something immediate, which was this Paragon employee that I already knew for myself based on my own investigation was definitely sent for me. Again, they were predicting my moves, right? So they went ahead, this organized trafficking, rape trafficking ring, because I had showed up in person at the FBI office in Texas on April 27, 2023. They knew I was going to show up in person, and they predicted which agency I was going to go to, the FBI. So they went ahead and preemptively had that security guard at the front to already be anticipating me to report. They're thinking ahead based on my behavior.
Or did they know, have you got a tracking device in you, and they knew because your brain was already mapped, and the same as mine was, because when they sent me to the Philippines to marry Dolores, when I came back, the man that I'd been communicating with all of this time, I went to an electric store in my hometown, and he just happened to be there. And I'd been communicating for him for 2 weeks via thought while I was in the Philippines. So is the tracking device in you?
So you are the expert on your own targeting, and that's how I feel.
Well, yeah, well, not an expert, but we're, everything is different, within us, isn't it? It's, because when you were saying about the car having the tracking device, I thought, well, perhaps you're looking in the wrong place. Perhaps it's you that's actually got the device in you. So they were tracking you, and the other ones have managed to get hold of the information.
Yeah. So you're the expert on your own targeting, and I'm never going to tell a targeted individual that their experience is wrong, because the technology that's used in this program truly is stuff that most regular people do not know about, and second of all, that most regular people would tend to think doesn't exist when they first hear about it. So I'm never going to tell you that hasn't happened in your case.
No, I was just wondering if the tracking device was actually in you.
Right. In my case, so I say all that to say that in my case, I am absolutely certain, because of investigating this and because of mostly, honestly, pattern recognition with the methods these people use, I'm very, 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 very confident that, especially up to this point, I had not been implanted. I'm extremely confident of that. I had not had any of the symptoms that most implant torture victims have. Up to this point in Texas, they had been using, just to really quickly, so with the tracking device on the vehicle, just to give some more background, it became extremely clear through direct experience that these organized traffickers, these pimps, these rapists, their first tactic is to illegally place a tracking device on the vehicle of whoever they're trying to stalk. How do I know that, Roy? Well, because in 2 instances, which I put together actually after this happened with Gil Lopez, I actually didn't know or put it together until after. In 2 instances, tracking devices had been placed on my vehicle while in Texas by strangers. The first time was in late 2022. My phone randomly gave me a message that basically an AirTag was detected moving with me, and it showed me a red line on the map of where my car had gone that day. I made a big fuss about it, and whoever had tried to do that figured out that it wasn't going to work on me, and they backed off. And in the second instance, it was a similar situation. Creepy men who do this totally illegally and totally non-consensually. And in the second instance, that did not lead to anyone breaking in, drugging, and raping me in my sleep. Another man placed a tracking device on my vehicle before Gil Lopez, before April of 2023. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's that pattern recognition and how
no,
much...
I wasn't doubting you, because
I know you're not.
No, because you use the word predictive, and I know they do use the predictive as well. Prediction.
Yes, absolutely. And it just speaks to how bad this problem is in Texas. They're getting away with it every single day. They are placing tracking devices on vehicles illegally. You don't have to do anything to become involved with them. All you have to do is be a single woman.
Or a single man.
And that's correct, absolutely. And thank you for saying that, Roy. That's important. It's become extremely clear as far as the breaking in, drugging, and raping in the sleep. There are multiple male targeted individuals who have also been broken into, drugged, and raped in the sleep. And the males who have come forward about that are extremely courageous for doing so. There's no shame in being raped. And no one should stigmatize a man for being a victim of this and being vocal about it. All victims should be vocal, and
Well
people should
said,
not
Lexa.
thank you. People should not try to act like someone's less of a man because they've been raped. There's nothing consensual about rape. There's nothing shameful. So you're right. They also rape males in their in their sleep as well. They're doing it all over and absolutely doing it, and with the sexism thing, I won't get into too much of that, but you're right. They're doing it to anybody.
Yeah.
And all it has to be, they're predators, they're rapists. So you don't have to do anything to put yourself in a bad position, which is what most people think of. All you have to do is be someone they want to rape for whatever reason that may be. But yes, you're totally
Well,
right.
they believe a lot of time it's to sell it on the dark web as well. Whether that's true or not, but that's a lot of what they say, isn't it?
Yes, Roy. Excuse me. They have a profit, part of the thing when people hear about this, especially people who are not familiar with the targeted individual program, part of their question is, why would someone do this? Why would this many people do this? Well, there's many different reasons that we're aware of. And specifically with a lot of the electronic torture that other targeted individuals have been victim to, that I've been victim to, a very small percentage of it, but most of it not. Part of the motivation is experimentation, and they're being paid to experiment and all these other things. They've got these other motives, but in this case, the motive is largely profit motive, from profiting from selling it on the dark web, like you said. Okay, we're getting, oh my goodness. I'm going to try my best to sum it up. So we get to the last day of me going to the FBI. And at that time I said, because, people try to say to me, you don't have any evidence. I was trying to get ahead of it. I said to Desiree, who was the human trafficking contact at the FBI, who did believe me, and who I was going to try to build a case against these traffickers with, because I'm against rape. You can't just do this to people. This is totally illegal. I said to her, look, I have no doubt that this man, this Paragon employee, is in on this rape trafficking organized criminal syndicate. If you follow him right now, look into his phone and follow him, I absolutely guarantee you that we will find the evidence that he is reporting back to someone about me in particular, and whoever that someone is someone else who's in on this pimp rape program. I said, I guarantee you, we just got to do it now, So long and short of it, Roy, is that an agency operative. So because it became clear that I was not going to stop, and for all these other reasons, so that they could have access to my body and my sleep, so that they could discredit me, so that they could prevent legitimate government intervention, I was falsely imprisoned in a psychiatric facility pretty much the next day after that last time I went to the FBI. They went out of their way to do this, and there's details about how I know that whoever organized that. I'm sorry, I've shared so many details on my YouTube, and I just don't want to take 12 hours here. So
no, it's all, you take your time.
Thank you. There's details of how I know that the particular agency operative who went out of their way to get someone close in my life to go to them and write up a magistrate's order for me to be falsely imprisoned in this psychiatric facility. It wasn't just because it sounds out there. It wasn't just because of the content of what I was saying and the fact that most people don't know about organized crime and how it actually works. It was specifically to contain me for the purposes of none of these criminal racketeers going to jail. So they set me up. They had a person in my life who I was close to and depended on at the time. They had him naively meet up with them. And they basically cornered him and pressured him to have me falsely imprisoned. They couldn't have had me falsely imprisoned any other way. They had to go to this person because they knew they didn't have anything to actually have me falsely imprisoned. So they had to try to use and manipulate someone close in my life at the time who wasn't aware of how the full extent to how this stuff works, and trying to use other information that they would have put together about him to manipulate me. Long story short, I was falsely imprisoned in a psychiatric facility in Charlotte, North Carolina. And within that facility, I was broken in. Sorry. So it's not technically the same breaking in. I was drugged and raped in my sleep multiple times in that facility. I don't know how many times. The first time, Roy, was the second night I was there. I was on the bottom floor, and they actually had, it's like the emergency room of the psychiatric facility. Again, when they're asking me questions, all I'm doing is giving the facts of the case. It was clear from the written magistrate's order that it had been written not by the person in my life that they went to and used as the patsy to set me up, who, just really quickly, that person did betray me. However, I ultimately blame the traffickers for what they did and not that person. But I do put responsibility on both. It was clear from the magistrate's order that the FBI operative, I'm almost certain it was an FBI operative, but I'm not 100% certain of that. I know it was someone with one of the agencies, that they wrote out the magistrate's order. At the very end, the law in Charlotte, North Carolina is that they cannot falsely imprison you. They cannot put you in a psychiatric facility on an involuntary hold unless they can prove that you're a danger to yourself or others. The last line on the magistrate's order was, she is a danger to herself and others. The person who they manipulated to say this under their name never said that. It's very clear that the agency manipulated and wrote this information. They wanted to seal the deal. They wanted to make sure I was falsely imprisoned for all the reasons that I had mentioned. The second night that I was there, again, I woke up, felt normal at first, and found semen on the bed. And the reason I found the semen is because males and females are being housed in this emergency section of the psychiatric hospital. And I found that man, one of the male patients, trying to cover up the semen stain. I was like walking to get breakfast, and my bed was actually out in the hallway. It's so crammed. I found him trying to cover up with the sheets that semen stain. I immediately said in front of everyone, check the cameras from last night, right? And they tried to make me think they would check the cameras. They had me committed. You know, they come down on you. I'm sure many are aware of how psychiatry is used to do the bidding of the three-letter agencies. Many aren't aware of that, but what I can absolutely confirm, what my testimony confirms, is that there are multiple people who work at the psychiatric facilities who are actually completely knowingly in on and complicit in the raping of patients in the facilities while they're in the facilities. In addition to finding the semen, I woke up with the physiological symptoms that I always had. I'll just say one of them now, which is blood, a lot of blood coming from my anus. I apologize to be that out there. I won't be too gross, but I'm trying to let people know how I know.
Of course.
I told the judge that, they make you you have to see a judge for them to legally keep you there. I told the judge all this. I told everyone that I was being raped there. So everything up until that time, finally I got out of the false imprisonment. There's so much about the false imprisonment. They broke the law. Just to circle really quickly back to something that you said earlier about rape kits. Once I figured out, especially from finding the semen and the blood from the second night that I was there at that facility, I demanded that I see a medical doctor and have a rape kit done. I went to them multiple times, demanding this. It is illegal for them to refuse medical doctor in a medical emergency, and it's absolutely a medical emergency to be raped. They broke the law in refusing me a medical doctor and refusing me a rape kit. Roy, I called the FBI office. I got one of the employees of these psychiatric facilities, the lowest level, they're called psych techs. So they have computers. The psych techs have computers. So I actually kind of befriended a couple of the psych techs and had them, because I didn't have access to internet or anything, had them look up the phone number of the FBI and as well as the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department Sex Crimes Unit. There's also many other times throughout this that I went to the police up to this point that I haven't gone into total detail of. I called the FBI and the CMPD Sex Crimes Unit from the phone of the psychiatric facility to say, I'm being illegally held in a psychiatric facility because I'm a victim of organized crime. I have been raped multiple times in this facility. They are refusing me a rape kit and refusing me a medical doctor. So just to show you, like, it doesn't matter what I've done. So I'm just going to sum up the rest of this really quickly, Roy.
Thank you, Lexa.
Ever since then, ever since me getting out of the false imprisonment, it's been a continuous trying to keep myself safe. My attackers have stalked me all across the country at this point, including from beginning of October 2023 to now. I'm not going to keep you all day. They continue to break in, drug, and rape me in my sleep. I barricade doors. I secure doors and everything. They tamper with cameras. They absolutely do this to try to cover their tracks. They've left semen other times. It all boils down to the fact that they're doing this with impunity because I know that I can't go to the police. I've gone to the police over 20 times, including 5 times to the FBI. How did that end up for me? So any reasonable person, I would ask anyone watching, if you had been a victim of this, you had gone to the police this many times, and it had only ended worse for you, what would you do? So I can answer any questions you have. I know we're right at the mark.
No,
I think you said
it's oh, there was rape kit, so denial. I'm just going to pause it for a sec because there was a couple.
Yeah.
Right. So how long were you in the hospital for, Lexa? In the mental hospital?
So I was falsely imprisoned in that psychiatric facility for the purposes of containing and discrediting me for 30 days.
Right. And while you were in there, what about drugs? Did they make you take anything?
Yes, they did. So from the beginning, and it's just part of how the system works, most of the people that they bring in there, they're going to try to get to take psychiatric medication. So from the beginning, pretty much they were trying to say, only information I was giving to the psychiatrist there was information specifically about the rape trafficking case, what I had been victim to and what I knew about it. So they had been trying to get me to take Risperdal, and of course I refused, knowing that this is not a mental illness, this is not psychosis, these are true facts of organized crime. In North Carolina, they have a law that if 2 or more psychiatrists agree that you have to be forcibly medicated against your will, that they can legally forcibly medicate you against your will. It took them a lot to even get me to even talk to any psychiatrists for them to do that, but it's very clear that they had it set out from the outset to try to do that. And I suspect that the head psychiatrist at that hospital, I'll just say now, and I haven't said this publicly yet, I do suspect that he's in on the rape trafficking knowingly, in on the organized criminal syndicate. So there was a very clear ahead of time instruction from him to the psychiatrist to forcibly medicate me, to find me in need of it. I was able to get a couple of the psychiatrists to kind of believe me on some things, right? Like, so I was able to get the psychiatrists to believe me and support me in some ways. Believe and support might not be the right terms, but things were not all 100% on their terms. I was able to convince a couple of them in some ways, but at the end of the day, who's paying their bills, who's telling them what to do? And they're not familiar with organized crime, right? So to them, it's psychosis in my case, or even worse, that they try to falsely label a targeted individual or a organized trafficking victim with. But they're not. So like saying all these different moving parts of these different stalkers and everything, it's not it's a real material program that we have proof of, and I have proof of, that really happens. And they falsely label it. So to some extent, the psychiatrists believe those false labels. In my case, I can't speak for others, I can speak for myself. this has never been a mental illness. I'm not mentally ill. You know, I have no, I'm very confident in knowing that what they did was 100% illegal.
So after the 30 days, Lexa, then they let you go. Did you have to have any follow-ups after that, or was that the end of it with them?
So Roy, this is where it gets they tried to cook it up that way, let's just say. I was able, thank goodness for my mother, who hired a private attorney and used her last money to hire a private attorney who told me what was in my interests and what was legally going to happen. I'm so sorry to not go into too much detail.
No.
To answer your question, they absolutely tried to. So within 2 days of me getting out of that psychiatric facility, they were already stalking me again and actually trying to falsely imprison me again, I'll just say. And I actually moved cities immediately.
Right. Okay.
Within 2 days.
Right. Thanks, Lexa. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Lexa?
I would just say that I encourage everyone who hears this, no matter where they're coming at it, to think about organized trafficking differently, to think of it in larger terms. A lot of the things we know about traffickers are true, but they're not the full picture when it comes to the organized crime coordinated by the Targeted Individual Program and the racketeers, the individual racketeers within the 3-letter agencies, the FBI and the CIA, et cetera, in the US, who are knowingly pimps, who are knowingly raping people, who are knowingly facilitating this pimping and raping and then using color of authority to contain the victims. We absolutely will be able to end this once and for all, totally legally and peacefully, with the support of the public. The public has to know what's going on. Once people know and understand, they are so against this. People hate, you know, I don't want the police, who are supposed to protect us, to be the ones pimping and raping. I don't want this to be going on in my name as a citizen under the color of authority of police, who are actually criminals. And the people have to know about this. That's the majority of people have to know about this and what's really happening. And once they do, they're against it. They despise it, rightfully so, because it's evil.
Thank you ever so much, Lexa. And lovely to have met you. And I wish you peace and everything, Lexa. And let's get this program shut down. The sooner the better.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roy.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Lexa.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.